Howdy, y'all. Miss Brewer here. It's such a lovely day outside. I thought I'd read you a story out in my backyard. Look at this awesome cactus, about to be covered with so many flowers. Such cool new growth. Anyway, the story I've chosen to read to you today is called Extra Yarn, written by Barnett, illustrated by John Clausen. If you're a banana slug, you've heard me say this a million times, but this is one of my favorite books. In it, a little girl gets some yarn, and she knits and knits and knits. And knitting is one of my favorite things to do. It's such a peaceful hobby, and I like giving away things that are useful and beautiful to my friends and family. Here we go. Extra yarn. On a cold afternoon, in a cold little town, where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. Wonder what she'll do with the yarn. So she went home and she knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too, but there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. What do you think she's going to do with all that extra yarn? At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone. Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around and looking at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." Do you think she can? But it turned out she could, and she did, even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and Mr. Pendleton, and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louis. Do you think she has any extra yarn? She made sweaters for everyone except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she even made Mr. Crabtree. I messed that up. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then, Annabelle still had extra yarn. She's quite the problem solver, don't you think? She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats and for other animals too. Soon people thought, soon Annabelle will run out of yarn. But it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Boy, she's creative. Can you think of another character trait that would describe Annabelle? What text evidence could you use to support your opinion? things began to change in that little town. We can see these changes. What other changes do you think might have happened in the town because of Annabelle? News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. He demanded. I wonder what kind of character this archduke will be. What do you think? And how do you know? Let's find out. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I'm willing to make you an offer of $1 million. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. $2 million, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." $10 million, shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. What do you think might happen next? Will the archduke go away? So that night, the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house. And they stole the box and took it to the archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea to his castle. The archduke put on his favorite song, and he sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box, and he lifted its lid, and he looked inside. What do you think he's going to find inside the box? His mustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. Did you guess that the box would be empty? The archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." Why do you suppose the box was empty? But, see the box on the ice? Floating across the sea? I wonder, where will the box go? What do you think? Did you guess it would go back to Annabelle? Now what's in the box? And it turned out she was happy. Why do you think the archduke's curse didn't affect Annabelle? This book was Extra Yarn by Barnett, illustrated by John Clausen, and I hope this book is now one of your favorites.